Hi, everybody. Once again, it's a Thursday and time for a podcast. We haven't had too many people this time send their questions in. So perhaps I'll talk about the paradox of spiritual development. It's an interesting title, if nothing else. It's a worthwhile title to have. It's a dilemma, actually. How to look at something from an honest perspective is very, very difficult. Most of our relationship with life is focused on our personalities and how we attempt to improve them the best we can, improve our knowledge, improve our relationships, improve our engagement with life and with respect to other people and how they are. But within all of that whole structure is the relationship that we have with how we think we have to be with respect to other people and how they think we have to be. It's a dilemma because it impacts upon spiritual development. And spiritual development has many facets. From my perspective, I normally look at it from the perspective of an engagement with energy and how energy is flowing through you and how that impacts on other people and how the relationship that we have with energy affects ourselves. At the head of it all is the great fear that we will not be the same as what we were before. Because within our dreams, our life, we wish to be something approximating the same thing as we were before, but times 10. Somehow we have the illusion that we have to be exactly as we are, and we also have the illusion that we have to be exactly different than what we are. These are two illusions that are, for heaven's sake, in the land of imagination, rules, regulations, and beliefs that are really very difficult for us to overcome. Trying to measure our relationship internally, first of all, is really basically very difficult because the concept of measurement is based on rules and regulations, once again, that we are fed with respect to how our imagination sees how we have to be. It's vital for us to attempt to consider that some of these belief systems may be of some help in helping us to engage with life the best we possibly can. And the best we possibly can doesn't include perfection. And it's a dilemma. Many of us have been brought up in various ways, including judgmental ways, including ways where we try to emulate our internal or external teachers, parental background and what have you. And our parents themselves were not perfect. It's just the way we are. So we lean on an engagement with how we think a perfect person should really be. And we have, in Christianity, we have Jesus, and in Buddhism, Buddha, and in Islam, Muhammad, and in Hinduism, Krishna. And Taoist orientations really relate to the masters or immortals. And everyone has this kind of idea that as they see these images, we should be that way if we are actually spiritually developed. In fact, that's where a great deal of misunderstanding occurs. We are what we are, and we engage the way we engage, and we don't pay much attention to what that might be in our spiritual development. Although there are reflexes that express themselves pretty strongly over whatever time period that you're involved with trying to engage with life, the best you possibly can. At the other end of it is the concept of power. There is a concept of power, kind of, one would think that it was opposite to love. One would think that it might even be opposite to intelligence sometimes. And in fact, these three principles of will, personalized will and power, love, a little bit of wisdom thrown into that, hopefully, and an ability to act in particular ways that seem intelligent. All of these three ways of acting in our life are kind of semi-fused together. We don't spend a lot of time in any one of them. We usually spend more time in defending how we function. The problem with that is that there's really no defense needed, yet at the same time we imply or explode with our versions of what that should be. The dilemma with our particular way of looking at this is that it's a personality looking. It's not a higher state looking. Our higher state looking, if we start to act that way, and I mean act, then what we're really doing is engaging in a particular manner that is not real. Our acting is acting, and we're acting as if. Now, there is a principle of acting as if in the old traditional methods of a relationship with learning how to function amongst others. If you act as if you're important, then you will be important. In fact, that may be not real. It's very difficult for people to slow down their reflex reactions to the tenderness that they hold internally with respect to the family background. It goes way back there. Father, mother, person who is the boss, the teachers, whatever they may be. We miss the fact that we want to be like them. So we mimic them. And that puts kind of a little bit of a wall in between us being as honest with ourselves as we possibly can, meaning asking ourselves questions about what we think might be true or what we believe might be true. Now that I know is against how people believe they should be to be spiritual, because logistically you have groups of people who believe whatever they need to believe to be valued by that group of people. This is really fundamentally how we function. This is a very difficult discussion you can have with yourself. Our relationship with growth is energetic in nature. Energy comes into us through the auspices of these chakras, one could say. At least that's what I'm saying from my perspective. You could call that whole mechanism an aspect of the soul, manifesting energy into us, or intensity into us, that we can use in various degrees for the purpose of engaging with life the way we think it needs to be engaged with, because we've learned how to do that from our past. It doesn't mean it's negative. It just doesn't mean that it's always very constructive. But we believe the forms that we construct are valuable and basically pitch perfect in relationship to how we use that energy, albeit unconscious. This unconscious relationship is a part of beginning to note how we function. The reflex to assess that or judge it is something that relates to us being the adult and how we find fault with or appreciate either one or many other things, all various degrees, of course, how we engage with life and that life flow. We begin to acknowledge and recognize as we become a little bit more conscious of that universal flow or flow of energy that operates through every living being and every living thing. We begin to realize that we are cultivating how we are. We are engaging with how we are. And we are protecting how we are. We are not considering relationship with others always, nor can we, because we engage with how we are. That is our first cause. How you consider that particular are to be, how you are, is how you engage with life and how you believe you must engage with life to be functional as a human being. Now, when that's all unconscious, we're quite happy because we defend whatever we do or not do. And our relationship with this is profoundly interesting because when we're unconscious, we just do it and we validate our doing. And that is how we are. Neither good nor bad, right or wrong. It's what we are. Once we begin to question, we need to question little at a time so we understand ourselves, not so we beat ourselves up. Understanding ourselves is different than being right or wrong, good or bad. Thinking about that for a second. When we get to realize that all of these structures or reflexes that we have, habitual engagements that we declare valuable within ourselves, we begin to notice that sometimes those make sense to us. Other times they don't make sense. And we wonder why we do them, and sometimes we just don't want to. And then we find out it's very difficult not to do reflexively those things that we have been trained to do. Some of them are really important for us, and we engage with life that way. Some of them not that important, but they are still there, and we think that they should be important because we do them. It's very difficult to be honest inside without cultivating that kind of dominance or will aspect that we have within ourselves that seems to be necessary, from our perspective, to protect how we normally function. I know we're talking about energy coming in from other states, from a higher level or another level of engagement with energy, because we are energy ourselves, of course, as you probably already realize. So that energy coming in from another state can be used to help us to learn about us and even train ourselves not to judge so much others or ourselves, but to learn how to understand why we do things and why we don't, and why we engage the way we do. Of course, remembering, sounds complicated, but remembering that our reflexes will play through no matter what we do. So the concept of stopping something from happening inside ourselves automatically just because we catch it once, that to us may seem to declare somehow that we're of great value, is just a way of sealing our values, making us feel comforted by what we catch and what we demand we must do differently. All of this is important and probably necessary because only this reason, more energy will consciously come in. In other words, you will be aware of more energy coming into you as you grow spiritually. Meaning, you will be consciously aware of how you function, and you must allow yourself to be patient with yourself and compassionate with yourself and loving in the sense that you no longer send your love to how you normally function only, and you leave a little bit of love there so that you can engage slightly different than what you normally do, without judging what you've normally done as something bad or good, right or wrong. I know there are elements of this whole structure that really focus on only these things are right, only those, and all the rest is wrong. Nobody can engage with all of the principles of never hurting a single fly. Not even the giants can do that. If they step on an ant, it bothers them because it could be the reincarnation of a family member or an old friend. This is very difficult. But you're not called upon to do that in spiritual growth. They are taking it to an extreme, as all systems take their rules and regulations to an extreme, at least to some degree. And in fact, some of this is, or could be, used to notice things. For example, if you take something to an extreme, you can begin to realize that you can take things to an extreme. Don't have to comply with it, but you can realize that you do. That means, in that one thing that you realize you do take things to an extreme, you're subject to taking things to an extreme that you won't notice. Meaning, everybody is bad if they do this. Everybody is good if they do that. Good and bad are tied together on one big line, usually related to coarser and more sensitive and more understanding, more compassionate, more ability to soften down their relationship with how things have to be, to live in life in a world where there are so many have-to-bes and so many rights versus wrongs, and nobody gets it right. Although, if you believe you get whatever it is right, then you will watch others really strongly and notice often that they do not. But you may not be able to notice that you do not either, because your relationship with you is well defended, because you are vulnerable to the subjugation of your judgment of others. Not negative, just a facet of an individual who functions relative to the need to defend against them being vulnerable. All of us are vulnerable. Now let me try to explain that a little bit. If there is an increase in energy coming from another state that is doubled overnight in you, you will perceive more than you could ever perceive before consciously. I don't care whether you could perceive anything consciously. You'll perceive more. Because your brain is stimulated. Your nervous system is stimulated. The endocrine system is stimulated. If nothing else, you will react to those interactions from a higher state. Along with that, because you have relative intelligence, no disrespect to anybody, as we all have, you will notice things you didn't notice before. And your enemies, your friends, your loved ones, they will appear differently than what they appeared like before. Because you are not able to perceive those little innuendos that appeared not to be there before. They've always been there. They are neither good nor bad, or worse, terrible, anything other than what they were before, because no one is always one particular way with anyone. The chiding that you do to others is the fear, basically, that you might be similar, because you're reacting strongly. That's where that love and compassion comes in. Wow. If you have too much of that, you may not be able to do anything that you need a will to engage with. You might just have a sense of loving that makes you blotto. Would that would be true for a little while anyway. And you won't be able to do anything. You won't want to. There's no need to. Why should you? All that's being stimulated there is that sense of loving that is truly there, but at the same time, that sense of engaging in a place that validates you. Now, that would be validating the sense of loving, and you would not want to leave that. Nothing illogical about that. Just a logical, reflexive response to how an individual might function for the purpose of engaging with life. The willfulness without a balance that can occur because various frequencies operate through these systems that we have can engage with the coarser levels of a will as well as a higher, more divine orientation. More divine orientation, to give you an example, would enclose everything, seeing anything and everything that appears to us to be different as the same, because the reflex to engage with an internal will for a purpose to reach into a higher state is the same for whatever reflex can be garnered to engage with a thought, a belief, and a hope that you would engage with a higher state. That higher state would know that. We have a hard time with this one because we have to assess from our perspectives, our beliefs, our needs that we have to relate to being right. We would have to perceive that and defend at the same time our way of doing things. That's too complicated for us. And we tend to assess based on how others should see the world of spiritual development, even if they can't. And ours, no matter what it is not fully complete either. We are called human beings. There is an aspect of arrogance that goes with the importance of how an individual functions perfectly, directly, as higher levels might ask. That means they are quick in our world, because we are based in a survival system, to assess and judge others based on the differences when compared with our way of seeing things. That is just really a misunderstanding on our part, and an inability to be conscious enough to recognize the relationship of another with a higher state, and each and every individual, if they are alive, is related to a higher state. Remember the first part? Energy comes in to engage with us and help us to be involved with life. Now, if you have ever read Hermes, old traditional stuff, not negative, you'd be surprised to see that actually that interaction, or that constructed soul, is given a voice. It's very interesting, because that voice attempts to help the individual to understand the relationship that they have with existence here, as well as with existence at a higher state. Very disconcerting if you start hearing voices in your head, I'm sure. But if you begin to notice consciously your relationship with you as an individual, impacted upon by the whole of your life, leaving nothing out, every tiny speck of engagement with experience, all the things you wish you hadn't done, all the things that you wish you could do more of, all the things that are there and you can remember them, all the things that are there and you can't remember them. It would be an onslaught of material coming into you so that you could see it. But unfortunately, we would be so close to it that we wouldn't have learned how to pull away from it as a distance. That's part of the spiritual developmental engagement that we are moving towards as a species, so that you can watch it and know what makes you up as an individual. Perhaps recognize some normalizing, engaging lifetimes that were quite different than now, because of the times, poverty stricken, whether you're noble or not. I've never met so many queens and kings in my whole life, with reincarnation as a topic. And some people are multiplicity of kings. Wow, holy smokes. But some people in our lives believe they're kings and queens, and they're not. They just act that way. It's because they can't see that they're acting that way. And it's not bad or good to act that way, but they are a product of their relationship with how to survive here, because it engages with their past and the vulnerability that they have internally about their past. This is not negative, it's just misunderstanding. Those higher levels that enable energy to pour through us, one could say, are there. The energy is only there so you can learn how to engage with it. Sounds really simple. And you and I all know that it isn't that simple. And sometimes it's complicated. And we have to keep it complicated so that we feel comforted by the complication. That's a little coarser, one could say. But we are human beings, and we're young as a species. We're learning bit by bit. And we don't have time to take time to do that. But we do. Every second that we live life is of great value to us. And we live like we're in a fog. We don't necessarily take the time to consider and smile and even laugh a bit about how important we would like to be in the eyes of others so that we can feel more comfortable. If you ever become important in the eyes of others, the responsibility is horrendous. And you find out that there are so many different options in our relationship with engaging with others. And it is better that others learn that and begin to be okay with that, because that level of honesty within themselves is a catalyst for an increasing amount of energy to move towards and through that form our nervous system, our brain, purposes we use those energies for deeper understanding, for recognition that we're all in the same ship. And we misunderstand. We talk about levels of engagement. Whoa, boy, very important. At higher levels, they don't talk about higher levels versus lower levels. And if you believe they do, I would hazard a guess that that is an intermediate state. And we're all prone to thinking much about those intermediate states. We have a very difficult time understanding that those higher states would want nothing other than others to join at a higher state. We have difficulty with that because we're so focused on our ability, or inability as well, to engage with a deeper level of understanding that is experiential, not only memory work that we've been involved with, because that memory work is so helpful to us, at least engaging what we think might be valid or not, and then some days even able to move past some of that necessary reading that we've done. High levels are very continuous. When we leave these planes, it's because this form is unable to handle energy moving into it the way it has been throughout our lifetime. And there's a kind of kindness about that, I think. Although, wow, so many diseases caused by so many interactions with environment these days. Hard to consider that as a reality. But our relationship with us, each one having a relationship with themselves, can be helped by others who have a relationship internally with themselves. If they can perceive that flow, they can be of help to others. Not by even talking sometimes, just by being there. In other words, the ability to handle more energy flowing through you enables others to be more able to handle energy flowing through them. If, and only if, from my perspective, at least that's my hope, if and only if, they can handle the engagement with reconsidering what they believe has to be true beyond the comfort zone that an individual has constructed to allow them to feel superior to others, or superiorly, if that's a word, inferior to others. Just really depends a whole lot on how you've engaged with and been developed as an individual personality. These personalities are fields of force. Physical, magnetic, one could say, because it's an electrical system. The nervous system has a field around it. Brain has. It's tremendous. It's a law, universal law. There is a field around all currents, even at this physical level, etheric or magnetic, whatever you want to call it, emotional and mental structures, but more. The engagement with the brain, the intellect, which is profoundly there for an august reason, ultimately, so that it can see and perceive what is noted on a mind level, not a mental level, a mind level, deeper, beyond the norm of how we think we have to be. In a presentation, be it this one or any other, as you relate to life every single day, we are more than what we think we are. But we are learning what that means. And we need a lot of help with this. If indeed we want to move past the self-importance of each and every individual. In our world today, there's a focus on economics, money. If you have money, you're important. If you don't, well, you're not that important. See, it doesn't work that way. I remember stories in India, listening to many people talk about these stories, about kids who were 9 and 10 years old who stopped school, only because energy was pouring out of them so much that they couldn't attend school. They couldn't take it in. That mental structure was different. And they began on a journey within and without to enable their version of existence to go beyond the level of the mundane, the coarser. Of course, right away, people would say, oh, if I'm on my own completely, then I must be one of these people. That's how we think when we're children. We compete over everything. That's how we've learned how to exist. So those changes in there that relate to helping others, very difficult. Those changes with respect to being self-interested and important, meaning that you're superior, very different. Higher levels don't necessarily think that way. We're vulnerable in spiritual development because our personalities understand that if you don't do things in certain ways, you can't be spiritual. There is a whole different way to look at this. Many of you know the stories about me being clairvoyant at one point and then asked if I wanted to be clairvoyant or spiritual, and I happened to choose clairvoyance. No, I didn't. I chose spiritual. and with a little codicil. I would like to be clairvoyant every now and then, just if I need to help anybody. And the clairvoyance was gone in 2 weeks. Gone in 2 weeks, of the kind that I had. That was a bit of a shocker, because I realized, though, the importance of that leaving was to enable me to understand that clairvoyance was a part of a personality orientation. In the 70s, there was a lot of stuff about being psychic. You leave your body, be clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, matter of fact, clair anything you can get your hands on. Mm-hmm. Because that elevated your personality. You could be called spiritual then, and you could prove it. It's a dilemma for anyone to say that there are levels far beyond that interaction or that style or engagement with being able to transmit energy out of your system at a distance. Boy, that means you can be spiritual without being able to do anything. Yeah, sure. That's possible. Can you be spiritual and still do any of the other things? Yes, it is. But one does not cause another. Is it possible to be involved with psychokinesis, for example, without being spiritual? Absolutely. Clairvoyance? Absolutely. Clairsentience? Yes, absolutely. Clairaudient? Yes. Anything at a deeper level can be done if we knew how to train the personality and use the energy that comes in through our nervous system for a purpose in extension of ourselves, as an extension of ourselves. It's personalized. And that's the road that's the hardest to detect and the hardest to let go of. It's of great value then to be honest with yourself. That pulls in more energy. There's a link with internal trust that is really difficult to understand. And the expression of energy through that system for the purpose of a higher purpose rather than lower purposes, our purposes as they appear to be now, is quite disturbing. But very interesting. Quite fascinating. Well, but no one will ever know you, recognize you for how you are able to be of service if you don't tell them, if you don't engage with this service orientation. And it's true. But at the same time, engaging with service is a tremendous helper so that you can become consciously aware that energy does flow through you. There's a tremendous dynamic at levels that we can only barely imagine. And some would say, oh, well, they already know how those things are. And I would submit that you really basically don't. But you do relate to them in and around the belief systems and the engagements that others have had and your assessments of them and your willingness to be like them for a purpose related to your personality's orientations. This is not negative. This is the in-between stage and very difficult to overcome. But there is a great kindness. And that great kindness is the one that you can have for yourself. Beginning to learn how valuable the energy is flowing through you in a manner that relates to another person and their growth. That is a service, rather than the importance of you for having it grow or flow through you. This is very difficult for us to not only to comprehend, but to be a part of. The great paradox of spiritual development. The personalization of the importance of the individual, or the importance of that universal or higher state flow operating through you, enabling you to be a part of it and its purposes, as opposed to you gaining access to your purposes, your will and your desire. Oh yeah. Can you manipulate energy? Absolutely. It allows you to do that. Even gives you the juice to do it so that you can learn from it. Those higher levels have a great appreciation for the future domain of a being that's human, called human, a human being. It believes ultimately, because it has a part of it in us, that we will know and understand deeper than we do now eventually. This is not a negative thing. This is a huge trust, but extremely difficult for us, because we're at the stage where we're beginning to realize these capacities. Has been going on for quite a while, by the way, and the willingness and ability to go beyond our personalizations without devaluing ourselves, without becoming more valuable from our own self-interest point of view. There's a great vulnerability that if you don't perceive things, or others don't perceive things in you that are really very helpful, or defined as spiritual by us, that you can't really be spiritual. And that is a vulnerability that everybody will have to go through, because it's a recognition and an understanding of a deeper level process. And this is all process. I'd like to stop it there, and I wish everybody a tremendous amount of goodwill and good fortune in their journey, no matter where you are and what you're doing. Take care. Good night.